The Johnson family had always dreamed of owning a house with a bit of history. So when they stumbled upon a charming century-old Victorian home at an unbeatable price, they couldn't believe their luck. The house was a bit worn around the edges, with peeling paint and creaky floorboards. But it had the kind of character you just couldn't find in modern homes: stained glass windows, intricate woodwork, and even a wraparound porch that seemed perfect for lazy Sunday afternoons. After a quick tour, they were sold. The expansive backyard sealed the deal, offering plenty of space for their two children, Emma and Jake, to run around and explore. The family moved in during the height of summer, the long days filled with the sounds of unpacking, laughter, and the excited chatter of new beginnings. As they settled in, the Johnsons took to sprucing up the yard. Mr. Johnson, armed with a lawnmower and a set of gardening tools, decided to tame the wild, overgrown grass that had been left unattended for years. Emma and Jake helped too, picking wildflowers and making plans for a treehouse. Everything seemed perfect, like a dream come true. Growing more curious, he called his wife over. Together, they began to clear away the thick layers of dirt and grass, revealing what could only be gravestones. The stones were ancient, so weathered that the inscriptions were barely readable, smoothed by the passage of time. After some effort, they managed to make out a few faint names and dates, some stretching back to the early 1800s. A shiver ran down Mrs. Johnson's spine as she grasped what they had uncovered. This is a cemetery," she whispered, her voice trembling. The realization hit them like a cold gust of wind. Their dream home held a secret, a forgotten, neglected graveyard right in their own backyard. That evening, after the children had gone to bed, the Johnsons sat in the living room, their earlier excitement replaced by a heavy unease. They began to piece together the history of their property, searching online and digging through old records at the local library. They learned that their house had been built on land that was once part of a small, private cemetery, likely belonging to a family that had lived in the area centuries ago. Over the years, as the town grew and expanded, the cemetery had been all but forgotten, and the gravestones left to sink into the earth. The next day, they reached out to the local historical society, hoping for some guidance. The society confirmed their discovery and explained that the graves were indeed authentic but had long been left undisturbed. "There's no danger," the historian assured them over the phone, "but it's understandable if you're feeling uneasy. Not everyone is comfortable with living so close to the past." In the days that followed, the Johnsons couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The once warm and inviting house now felt cold, as though the very air had grown heavier. The creaks and groans of the old wood, which they had once found charming, now sounded ominous, like the house was speaking to them in a language they couldn't understand. At night, strange things began to happen. It started with soft, almost imperceptible noises, whispers carried by the wind, the sound of footsteps in the hallway when no one was there, and doors that would slowly swing open on their own. Emma and Jake, once so thrilled with their new home, started to avoid the backyard, telling their parents that they felt watched whenever they went near the old gravestones. One evening, Mrs. Johnson awoke in the middle of the night to find the bedroom shrouded in an unnatural cold. She reached out to pull the covers tighter, but something caught her eye: a faint, translucent figure standing by the window. It was a woman, dressed in an old-fashioned gown, her face pale and sorrowful. She was staring out into the backyard, her gaze fixed on the old cemetery. Mrs. Johnson gasped, and as she blinked, the figure vanished, leaving her heart pounding in the silence. She didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, she confided in her husband, who had been growing increasingly uneasy himself. They both knew that they couldn't stay in the house much longer. The spirits of the past were too present, too restless, and it was clear that the house had secrets that were best left undisturbed. Within a few weeks, the Johnsons made the difficult decision to sell the house. They found a new home in a different neighborhood, one without any hidden histories or forgotten graves. As they packed up their belongings, they felt a mix of relief and sadness: relief to be leaving the unsettling presence behind, but sadness for the house they had once thought would be their forever home. Years later, They occasionally drove by their old house, now occupied by another family. The yard looked well kept, and the gravestones were still there, a quiet reminder of the past. The Johnsons couldn't help but wonder if the new owners knew about the cemetery, and if they, too, had experienced the strange occurrences that had driven them away. But they never stopped to ask, content to leave the past and the spirits of the old cemetery where they belonged.